everyone, David here. So getting into cars can be very difficult for people. What I thought about the other day was, what can you do to avoid sounding stupid? Because when you go to a car event your first time and you don't really know too much, you're kind of scared to say things, right? You're kind of scared to be like, that's a so-and-so, and then you're completely wrong. But you know what's even worse than doing that? Saying it in full-blown confidence. When you say something completely wrong in confidence, that is just like, never come back, please. But the other day, I sat here and I raw-dogged and just stared at my screen, and off the dome, just thought about kind of a cheat sheet for people who are new or old in cars. And I just figured, why not I just give 50 different facts or knowledge bases or lingo for new people to get into the scene or just learn something new. And this is not gonna be a crazy edited video. I'm literally just gonna vibe out with you guys and name some facts that I wrote down, and also to save you from sounding like an idiot at your local car meet. You know what? Let's get into it. Working on cars can be extraordinarily stressful, but you know what's even more stressful than that? Not being organized and working on cars. And that's why I want to thank the revolutionary company Boltster for sponsoring today's video. It's the first tool trade company that focuses directly on fastener retention and organization, and all of their products are based on customer feedback. Hey Matt, do you need something to organize your tools? They're basically indestructible. You take what you're doing and you can organize it inside these guys, and this could be for tools, this could be for individual bolts, and this is for smaller bolts.
Yeah, you like stick your bolt just
in there.
There, like instead of having them.
Yeah, give it a stretch.
Oh, come on now.
You'd literally probably run a car over this and it will do nothing.
It's probably really easy to wipe off being the material it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, look at that thing. Throw it in your car, throw it in your toolbox. And their blend of silicone has recently been approved for use in the United States Air Force. So them bald eagles need some maintenance, so they got some good organizers. So go show Boltster some love. They help me out, and they'll help you out by staying organized when working on your car. So number one, big misconception. Henry Ford did not invent the car. Carl Benz did in 1886. So yeah, 138 years ago. It's been a while. But yeah, that Benz, you know, Mercedes-Benz, you got it. But two is that Henry Ford didn't invent the car, but he did perfect the assembly line. The assembly line being that one person in the factory had one job. So if you were the person to put on the wheels or put on a nut or a bolt to a certain part, that was your one job. By doing that, that expedited the process of the vehicles being made, and at the same time, it made it cheaper to own a car. You could buy one. Cars were toys, right? Before the assembly line, cars were a flex. Henry Ford was kind of the guy to really make it possible for the masses to own cars, at least in the United States. Oh yeah, by the way, they were all black. They painted all of them black because it was cheaper. And there was a famous line that Henry Ford said, you could have any color you want as long as it's black. And they actually twisted this in Fast and Furious, where Vin Diesel says you can have any brew you want as long as it's a Corona. So that's why he says that. Number three is about DSM. I'm sure you've heard this term before. It means Diamond Star Motors. Now, if somebody says DSM, typically what they're talking about is the partnership between Chrysler and Mitsubishi. That's how you got things like the Eclipse, the Talon, the Plymouth Laser. Eagle was also Chrysler, but they don't exist anymore. Number four is the Corvette. The Corvette was actually created before the muscle cars. It was built in the 50s. The main competitor of the Corvette was the Thunderbird. So yeah, times have definitely changed. Thunderbirds, no more. So for number five, let's get into some car lingo. This one very much confused me when I first got into meeting people who talked about cars, and that is the term rear end. When somebody says, what rear end do you have? They're not talking about your rear bumper or your taillights or anything like that, which could, you know, in theory make sense. What they mean is the differential and the gearing inside the differential. So basically, what kind of gearing do you have? What ratio do you have in the back for its acceleration? Or is it a limited slip differential or an LSD? So that's just something very easy to take note of. Number six is my corner of the aisle, the Mustang. How do you tell the difference between all the different versions? There's a million different Mustangs, but in the modern era, it's very easy to see what the differences are. So the V6 Mustang, the notorious V6 Mustang, it ended in 2017. The way you can tell if a Mustang is a V6 and not a V8 is the emblem. And the emblem has an American flag with the 3 stripes and the pony. The EcoBoost, which is a 4-cylinder turbo Mustang, just has the pony. There's nothing around it, just the pony on the deck lid. And then with the GTs, it'll say GT. By the way, a 5.0 and a GT, like a Coyote 5.0 and a GT, is the same car. Some people think they're 2 different cars because they have 2 different emblems, but no, they're the same car. Anything with a snake emblem or a cobra is typically a Shelby or an SVT. An SVT stands for Special Vehicle Team, and that's something like a 2003 Cobra or a Terminator, for example. When talking about Honda engines, if somebody says something like a B18 or a K20 or a K24, that means the displacement. So the motor's physical size. So if you say B18, that's a 1.8 liter. If you say K20, that's a 2.0 liter. This doesn't apply to every car brand, but it also applies to things like Nissan, where if somebody says an SR20, that's a 2-liter engine, or an RB26 or RB25. RB26, 2.6 liter. So once you get the hang of it, it comes pretty naturally. The Camaro was a direct response to the Mustang. It was not just to have a cool car, it was a direct response to the Mustang. And it really started the war between all the domestic companies and the muscle cars. The main brands from Japan are Subaru, Honda, Mazda, Toyota, Mitsubishi, and Nissan. Toyota is the biggest, and Mitsubishi is just sad now. The main brands from Germany are Volkswagen, Mercedes, BMW, Porsche, and Audi. When you pronounce Audi, by the way, think of like an Audi belly button. That's how you say it, not Audi, Audi. The formula in the term Formula 1 just means the formula or the regulation that the teams are allowed to abide by. It's the rules, the formula. It's the rules of the car itself. Drag racing's main standard is 1,320 feet, or 1320. Hi, Kyle. There's quarter miles and there's eighth miles, and their times are going to be very different, so don't get them confused. A dog box or a sequential transmission, oversimplified, is a transmission without synchros in it. It sucks for street driving, but it's really great for acceleration. The GT40 is called the GT40 because it was 40 inches tall. And in 2005, when they did the tribute car, the Ford GT, they couldn't call it the GT40, because it was like 43 inches tall instead, or something like that. It wasn't the same height. Drifting originated in Japan, but didn't have a massive influx until the first Formula Drift Road Atlanta event in 2004. Audi doesn't make any cars in their modern lineup that are not all-wheel drive. That's what Quattro stands for. 4 wheels. Mean Mustache Man did in fact have a big part of creating the people's car, aka the Beetle Volkswagen. The average cost to get your driver's license in Germany is about $3,300 USD. This is because they actually train people to drive properly. Seriously, I've never felt safer in a country driving, ever. Even with no speed limit. Speaking of, the Autobahn is not one single road. It's actually all the highways in Germany, but they use a sign system to tell you if you have a speed limit or not, or if there's construction, etc., etc. NASCAR originated in Prohibition, running away from the police. They would soup up the cars to get away from the police when they were smuggling their goods. But then they decided to race each other instead, and that was history. Talladega is the largest NASCAR track in the country, but it is said to have been cursed by the Native Americans due to the Trail of Tears passed through here, and they were kicked out of the land. Yikes. And Talladega has had some of the craziest crashes in racing history, so maybe that curse is true. A diesel engine does not use spark plugs. It uses the compression of the gases and the fuel to create the boom. So basically the pressure is what makes the piston go up and down. BMW built aircraft before cars. Imagine who they built them for. Just take a guess. Speaking of that, Mitsubishi built the Mitsubishi Zero, the same plane that bombed Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. And if you're wondering why Japan did something so stupid, their genius idea was to try to destroy all the US Navy in one go, therefore they could keep conquering land in the Pacific. Basically for oil, because we embargoed them on oil, because we said, you're doing really bad things in Manchuria, you shouldn't do that anymore. So they weren't happy about that. A V4 engine is extraordinarily rare in a car. So if you go to a car event and you see a 4-cylinder, pretty much assume it's an inline 4 or the 4 cylinders are in a row. Don't go up to a car and be like, is that a V4? Yeah, don't do that. You'll be laughed out of proportion. If you are new to the JDM community and inline 6s, the Nissan inline 6 or the RB typically has the turbo on the right side. The 2JZ or Toyota's famous inline 6 has the turbo on the left side. And also the RB typically has a slight slant to it. It's kind of crooked. So don't get it confused. Make sure you take an eye on that so you don't sound stupid. The first cannonball run was actually to protest the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit. This was due to the oil crisis, and they thought that lowering the highway speeds to 55 would save gas. It really didn't. So the cannonball run was a race from New York to LA to get there as fast as possible without getting caught. And they still do it to this day. Volvo invented the seatbelt, but then gave it away for free, or the patent for free, because they realized how many lives it was actually going to save and that they couldn't keep it to themselves. You're a real one, Volvo. The Mazda Miata is so freaking good because it has 50-50 weight distribution. That means that the front of the car and the rear of the car are in perfect balance when it comes to the weight distribution. And that's what makes it so easy to drive and makes them so fun to drive, is because they're very confidence inspiring because there's no wiggle room in that weight distribution. It's also the best-selling two-seater roadster of all time for a reason. Lamborghini was a tractor manufacturer that bought a Ferrari, then didn't like it, then brought it to Enzo and said, fix my Ferrari, and Enzo basically said, no, my car is perfect. Therefore, Lamborghini went from tractors to building cars to prove a point. That's the very, very oversimplified version of why Lamborghini exists. Emil Jelinek, hopefully I got that right, named the Mercedes car company after his daughter. This would later be merged with Benz, the guy we talked about earlier, to create Mercedes-Benz. The first speeding ticket ever issued was for 8 miles an hour. It was in 1896 to Walter Arnold. What a legend. And he's got 2 first names. The best anti-theft device in the United States at this very moment is a manual transmission. Only 18% of the population in the United States knows how to drive a manual. It's very sad though. Hyundai and Kia are not from Japan, they are from Korea. Not the Korea you're thinking of. Let's move on. BYD is a Chinese car brand that made knockoffs of specifically BMWs for years. So back to some technical knowledge, there are typically 4 types of power adders. There's supercharging with a twin screw or TVS style supercharger where it's mounted straight on top and forces the air into the engine. Then there's turbocharging, which uses exhaust gases to your advantage, and it looks like a snail. And then there's centrifugal supercharging, which is kind of a mix of both. It's a belt-driven turbo, essentially. So when somebody pops open that hood and you see something the shape of a turbo, before you say anything, take a peek around the back, because you might see a belt on the other side, and that is a centrifugal supercharger. And then there's nitrous, which is just putting your car on speed, basically. A rotary engine, famously built by Mazda. It was invented by a guy named Wankel, but Mazda really took advantage of the design. It does not use pistons. A rotary uses a rotor, which goes in circles and kind of looks like the shape of a Dorito. Holden was an Australian car company that was down under, but it was pretty much a General Motors company. So they used a bunch of parts from Chevy and GM here in America. Chevy's performance engine that got so famous, the LS, started in the Catfish Camaro and also the C5 Corvette. That was the LS1. Then there's the LS2, LS3, LS7, it goes on and on. So if you hear the term LS, most of the time, it's a Chevy V8. There are LS B18s, but those are just naturally aspirated Honda engines. 90% of the time, an LS, it's gonna be used in a Chevy engine way of speak. This one's for extreme newbies. The advertised horsepower of a car is not what actually makes it to the ground. There's transmission lost, drivetrain loss, and usually the differential robs some too. If you get it dynoed and you feel like you're being lied to, you weren't lied to. It's just the drivetrain loss. Cuba had a blockade and an embargo from the United States from importing pretty much anything or exporting pretty much everything. Therefore, their cars are almost all a time capsule and arguably created some of the best mechanics in the world. Seriously, the Cubans have figured out how to use anything and everything to power their cars. So if you don't know anything about Formula 1, here's a crash course. The main rivalries that I would look up are this: James Hunt and Niki Lauda, Ayrton Senna versus Alain Prost, and just the legacy of Michael Schumacher. After that, you can really get caught up to the stakes of the sport and understand why it is such an intense sport. Also, if you haven't watched it, even as a car person not into Formula One, watch the Senna documentary. It's phenomenal. Tokyo Drift was the worst performing Fast and Furious at the box office, even though it's arguably the most realistic one when it comes to the cars, the lingo, and the driving. Tanner Faust famously drove the DK car, and he just shredded tires all day long on that set. But that is why the characters turned into freaking superheroes and secret agents, because Universal realized that they had to make a change to get people back in the seats and not alienate non-car people. The fastest time of the Nürburgring ever, or the Nordschleife, was by Porsche in the Porsche 919. It was a Le Mans winning car, but then they basically took all the regulations off and turned it up to 100 to make it unlimited. Like, do whatever they want with it. And it ran a 519. Crazy. The in-car footage makes your heart go crazy. Bonus fact, most car companies test at the Nürburgring because the environment kind of changes on demand. The track is so large and the elevation changes so much that on one side it could be raining, on the other side it could be very sunny. So that's why they do it. It's hard on a car. They can really test it and basically beat the snot out of it in different weather conditions. Mopar means it's Dodge's performance branch. So I know it sounds weird, it's not like Dodge Performance or anything. There is something called Direct Connection as well. But Mopar is essentially the performance branch, or high horsepower, all that kind of stuff for Dodge. People definitely get this one confused. Also, the Hemi engine during the NASCAR era was banned because it was too good. So it gave Mopar a very good legacy. If a car has a Spider version, typically all it means is that it's convertible. Just means that roof going down, drop top, baby. Ford was going to make a mid-engine sports car in the 90s, but then they actually took the investment and put it towards the Ford Explorer instead, due to SUVs being popular on the rise. Right around Jurassic Park, by the way. That's why the Explorer's in Jurassic Park. But they had all these Yamaha engines laying around that they were going to use, so they just put it in the Taurus instead and called it the Taurus SHO. But yeah, the Performance Taurus was because of a failed mid-engine concept. That story was told to me by a Ford employee, so I'm pretty sure it's true. Hopefully it's true. Subaru only builds cars with Boxer engines, meaning the pistons only go this way, they don't go this way. So if you hear somebody talk about an EJ engine, typically it's a Subaru engine. Oh yeah, DSMs typically use what's called the 4G63 engine. So that fact we talked about DSMs, yeah, that was the engine used in all those platforms, and also put in the Evo, the legendary Mitsubishi Evo. I just thought that was general knowledge car facts that could get people started, or you just enjoyed these and fell asleep to them. Who knows? I don't know. If you enjoyed this video, put it down in the comment section below, and if this video does bad, I won't do one again, so sorry. On that note, I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hit that like button. See you guys later. Bye.